Well, a very, very good evening and a very warm welcome indeed to you all to Open Door. This is the Open Door show from propertyCEO. I guess you probably worked that out because it says Open Door up there. It says propertyCEO over there. It's always difficult when I'm looking at the camera because it's all back to front. Look, my name's Richie Clapson. You might have guessed that because it says it underneath. And I'm here with the other half of propertyCEO, and you might have guessed who he is. It's Mr. Ian Child. Do you want to say good evening,
Good
Ian?
evening, everyone. Good evening. Good to have you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to be here, isn't it, Ian?
It is.
Good. It's great to have you with us. And over the next 45 minutes, as always, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of small-scale property development. Isn't that right?
It is. I nearly preempted you there because I was going to say that what we're going to be doing is covering some of the latest, news items, certainly talking during the course of the Open Door series to lots of the movers and shakers out there in the world of property, who hopefully can give us a bit of an inside track in what's going on in their neck of the woods. We're also going to be shining the spotlight on any areas of development where we think there could be a good opportunity for developers to be taking a look at, and tonight is no exception.
Shining a spotlight, I like it.
But
that's right. But above all, and this is the rules here, okay? There's one rule: you can have fun. It's 7 o'clock at night on a Thursday. We could be at home, but we're here with you, so we've got to have a bit of fun, and you need to have a bit of fun because, look, life is far too short, but we need you to join in. It is a question and answer show, so please put questions, comments, keep them clean, okay? Keep them clean in the chat box as we go through, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can during the show. So, Ian, what are we up to this evening? What are the plans? What are we going to be talking about?
Well, we're going to be talking about banks, actually, because we've had loads of people ask us questions about banks, and market does seem to be rather full of them at the moment, lots of banks for sale. So is converting a bank into residential a good idea? Definitely less competition, but exactly how easy or difficult are they to convert? You know, what do you do with the vaults? And I guess if you find any money left in the cash point, are you allowed to keep it? So all of these questions, or at least some of them, I think are going to be answered by the Right Honourable Mr. Clapson this evening.
I'll give it a go. Okay, that's for a little bit, but let's just see who's on this evening. So, I mean, last week, you might remember if you were on last week's show, although give us a wave, give a hands up if this is your first show. Give us a hands up if this is your first show. Actually, quite a few people, quite a few. Well, welcome to Open Door. So last week you would have missed the opportunity for us actually to have a go at our people that are coming on here. Now, we don't like to normally do that, but some people rock up late. And last week, Roma and Richard, they rocked up at 25:02. The show finishes at 1:45. But I noticed tonight they've actually logged on way before time. So Roma and Richard, welcome. And who else is on? Well, Lena's on, Alan's on, Dan's on, Jenny and Roma's on. Don't get confused with Roma and Richard. This is Jenny and Roma. They're different groups of people all together. Steve's on, Carol's on, Colin's on. Hello, Colin. Colin spent a long time with us today. Colin's on one of our training sessions today, and he's coming back tomorrow, and he's with us this evening. Colin, you crazy fool. What's the matter with you? Pardeep's on. Jackie's on. Gabriella's on. Look on here. Steve's on. Jamie's on. Caroline. Harvey's on. Hello, Harvey. Good evening to you. Harjinder's on. I haven't seen you on for a show for a while, so welcome. Karen's on. Josh is on. I could go on. Future comments in the chat box. Colin says, hello, really enjoyed today. Well, we enjoyed today as well, Colin, so I'm glad you did. That was worth it. Jenny and Roman says, Jenny, hello, Richie and Ian. Roman and Jenny here. Jenny and Roman here. They said it twice. Good evening, gent, says Dan. Arjinda says, great to be here, loving the show. Evening, guys, good to be here, says Jenny again. There's lots of comments in from them. We're not sure why they've done that. Caroline says, great to be here, looking forward to the show. Gary says, looking forward to hearing about banks. Nice to see you back on the show, although I thought, Karen says, nice to see you back on the show, although I thought you two were going to sit together. That might sound a bit odd, but for some people, you might have seen the show we did a while ago at the Property Investors Show, and we actually sat together. But we're at the moment, we're in separate studios. We're working on building the relationship. I think that's what we got to do. Anyway, Jenny says it's nice to be noticed. We like to be noticed. Well, because Jenny, if you put in the chat box every 5 minutes, you will be. Anyway, can you please put any questions you've got in the chat box? We will do our best to answer them as we go through. Before we talk about banks, Ian, any news itsms?
Well, it's been a bit of a newsy sort of week. In fact, there's only really been one source of news this week, which has been Mr. Sunak's budget. So he had a few things to say. So there was some a couple of things on property that were perhaps a bit of a standout, although not a lot of detail on either of them. First one was he's confirming that there's going to be 1.8 billion to deliver homes on brownfield and what they call underused land. So basically, there's been lots of toing and froing and gnashing of teeth around what the planning rules are going to be going forward. I'll come on to those in a sec, but one of the things that's been kind of the mainstay of all of the comments that we've heard all the way through the controversy has been that brownfield is still going to be kind of basically where things are going to pan out, and the government are committed to converting what they believe is over about 1 million units that they could convert from existing brownfield sites, and they're committing nearly £2 billion to that end to build on it. They've also had a rummage down the back of the sofa, found an additional 300 million, which is going to be locally led grant funding for local authorities to unlock smaller brownfield sites for housing and improve communities in line with their priorities. So obviously larger brownfield sites quite attractive to some people, but those smaller ones, yeah, they've got a grant to do that as well. So that was one thing that came out of the budget. It was all spend, spend, spend. And another one, there's talking of the planning system, the government's confirmed they've earmarked £65 million of funding for English local authorities to create a new digital planning system to, inverted commas, improve the planning regime. So not a particularly high bar, but 65 million should go quite a long way. They didn't actually go as far as to mention anything about the changes that are in the offing in the planning system, unfortunately, but they're at least pouring money into it, and it's going to be rolled out to 175 English local authorities. So a new system that we can all use, and hopefully the framework that goes with it will be better than the one that we've currently got. And then the final one was just kind of in a similar vein, really, which was our new-ish Housing Secretary, Michael Gove. He made a comment about the fact that he welcomes the idea of maintaining residents' say over individual planning applications. Those of you that can remember that far back, the plan originally for the new planning rules was for local people to have a bit less of a say in terms of individual planning applications, because the government was kind of focus has been very much on let's get planning done so that these buildings get built. And Michael Gove was asked for his views on that, and he actually did a bit of a U-turn there. So whilst he hasn't firmed up what the planning rules are going to look like or when they're going to come, he has indicated that residents will have a say in individual planning applications. And given that that was allegedly the reason they lost a by-election, no massive surprises there. But as we move forward, I think it will perhaps be the new year before he puts his barrow down on the direction of travel for the planning system. But we wait with bated breath. That's the news.
Good stuff. Well, there's the news. I mean, who needs to listen to ITV, BBC when you can come here and get all the news that you need? Okay. Should you consider converting banks? It's an interesting question, isn't it? We do get asked that quite a lot. People say, what about banks? Should I convert a bank? I mean, there are lots of banks coming to the market, lots of them out there. Now, in very simple terms, they are covered under permitted development, under Class MA, which is a permitted development right, where you don't have to have full planning permission. So in simple terms, yes, you should consider converting banks. Okay, definitely should be on your list. The new Class MA introduced this year, the 1st of August, means you can now convert banks in their entirety. There was under Class M, you could do up to 150 square meters of various things, but very restricted. And banks were a lot bigger than that. Now, under Class MA, there are some restrictions up to 1,500 square meters, but there's ways we can do things to get around that. But in principle, yes, you can convert banks. And primarily, if you know how to do it, you can convert the bank in its entirety under permitted development without full planning permission. So there's a starting point. I mean, what's not to like? I probably don't have to say any more. That would be fine. But we need to think about them a little bit more. But just go back to that in terms of stock coming to the market, because if you're going to think about banks, a lot of people say to me, should I consider banks? Well, the thing is, we're always looking for motivated sellers. Santander, Nationwide, Barclays, just to name a few, are closing down a huge amount of branches. So there's a lot of stock coming to the market. and they are highly motivated. They need to get rid of these things. You know, they've got long leases on them, they have long ownerships on them, or whatever. They've got to offload them. Okay, they've got to offload them. So banking is changing. Cashless banking. I actually went to the bank the other day to get some cash out, and I queued up for ages to see someone. There didn't seem to be any sort of tellers around there, just machines. And blow me, I rocked up after about 15 minutes in the queue, and I said, I'd like to draw a couple of grand cash out. Okay, you know, little deals you have to do every now and then. But no, I needed a couple of £1,000 cash. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, sir, it's a cashless bank. And I thought, I never heard of such a thing, a cashless bank. Oh, she said, no, it's totally online banking. It's the modern way. You know, I had to drive another 10 miles to go down the road and actually get a bank that actually had cash in. What a bizarre experience that was. So banking is changing, okay? Banking is changing. So there's lots of buildings becoming available. So that's a good start. But I guess, what's the inherent problems in converting a bank? Where are the problems when you think about it? Well, the truth, to be fair, there's not many, okay? If any, provided that you know what you're doing. So if you know how to convert banks, they are, I would say, generally always advantages, but a lot of people get put off. Now, the structure for banks often is a very robust structure. I mean, these buildings, particularly, I'm thinking about proper old banks. Okay, there are some modern banks out there which, you know, are just like shops. But let's just think about older banks to start with. Now, these buildings were not built to a budget. You know, they're very robust. Banks were often built as sort of signature buildings. They were one-upmanships. In a lot of towns and cities, you're the bank building. You know, Barclays had to be better than Lloyd's, and Lloyd's had to be better than. Do you know what I mean? These things went on. They were landmark buildings. Be careful, though. Be careful on that basis. Some of them could be listed. They're not all. You might be surprised. You look at a building and you think that's listed. Grade 2 listed, grade 1 in some instances. You can't do many alterations to it. Not that you might not want to, but I would generally, as a developer, first-time developer, steer clear of listed buildings. Okay. So they're often quite prominent buildings, not built to a budget, built very robustly, quality buildings. Okay, quality buildings. So that means you've got a great structure. You've got a great start. Yeah, I'm going to say foundation, but I'm talking that they'll be underground. Great foundation, though, in the structure of the building that can stand a certain amount of alteration. So you can play around with it. You can do things with it. Its floor capacities, its loading capacity is going to be quite high, okay, compared to some building structures out there. So they give you great opportunity to alter them. Having said that, just be careful, because the cost of changing a robust structure can sometimes be quite expensive. Moving major walls in banks, particularly when they're solid concrete, particularly we'll talk about vaults in a minute, can be quite expensive. So they're robust buildings. Okay, they can take a certain amount of alteration. They're probably going to be in good condition. Banks were generally looked after. They always had cash in the bank, you know, so they could do it. Never had a cash flow problem, did they? Not the banks. So my advice there is, if you can work with the existing main structure, the wall layouts, okay, then actually you've got a great scheme. You've got a great alteration, and it's going to be reasonably cost effective. Although, as always, you need a bunch of professionals to work. You need to understand how to work these schemes. A structural engineer here is what you need to advise and guide you. Now let's just touch on and just really just to be thinking about this. And I can see questions coming in, quite a few questions. So please, yeah, any questions to do with banks, alterations of banks, or indeed anything else to do with development, pop it in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them in a minute. That's once I've finished banging on about banks. Look, there are some features that offer great opportunities in banks, and I want you to think about those. First of all, the banking hall. Okay, a proper old banking hall. These were grand spaces, often double height. So when you might be told, I've got a 2-story building, you might find it's a 3-story, because the banking hall is a double height. So you can get an extra floor, sometimes a mezzanine floor in there. Okay. So actually, you know, you can suddenly get another 50% uplift in the area of your building. So that's an important thing. Look at the banking halls. Think about those spaces. Don't just think 2-story building, so many square feet, meters, whatever. Oh, I can't really get it to work. There's probably a whole nother floor in the banking hall area. Quite often they come with large basements. Okay, a lot of these buildings had large basements. You know what often is going to be in the basement. We'll talk about that in a minute. But large basements can be opened up. If you know how to open a basement up, and the reality is most people don't. Okay, I'm not going to start trying to do sketches in the air of how you open up a basement, but that's what we teach our students: how you open a basement up economically. And I'm not talking about digging in light wells outside, because that just does not work. Okay, but there are ways that you can open up basements and bring the whole of that space into the value of the building. Absolutely fundamental. Okay, absolutely fundamental. And then really on the upper floors, often the banking offices, the managers' offices, you know, those sort of places where, you know, in the old days you could go and sit in front of a big desk and have a chat with a bank manager. Not anymore. But those offices were quite grand spaces. They themselves, probably not two-story, but they had really high ceilings, you know, like a lot of the old Victorian houses. They can create stunning apartments. So they can add value, because volume adds value, not just square meterage. You know, we're talking about a one-bedroom flat or a two-bedroom flat. A two-bedroom flat's about 61 square meters, but actually 61 square meters with a high ceiling looks a lot bigger and can command extra value. So you'll get an uplift in your value. Just talk about the vaults, because the vaults are a big thing. Because a lot of people look at vaults and go, oh, I'm not sure, walk away. Okay, they are difficult and expensive to remove. Okay, some instances you might want to, but they're generally very difficult, and they can form an integral part of the building structure. So if you take them down, take them away, the building could fall in. Don't really want that. Okay, the key and the secret is knowing how to work a vault, how to work a vault into a scheme. And at the end of the day, if you're out there as a small scale property developer, that's what we teach our students. Okay, that's the great place in the market to be. Imagine you're trying to compete with Barratt's or Persimmons or whatever, who build boxes, and you're creating something of interest. You're converting the old bank building, you know, Bank Street apartments, bank apartments, whatever. You've got some of the original features in there. You've got the old vault. What about in the vault putting a communal gym? What about putting a gym just for one of those apartments, depending on sort of how high end it is? You could use them as storage. You don't have to take these things out. One of the problems with apartments or flats is a lack of storage. What about if you actually build some storage compartments? I mean, they're pretty secure in those bank vaults. Okay, you frame them off, you cage them off. People can, part of their purchase of their flats, they get a little storage unit each. How powerful is that? If you can convert them and build them into the flat spaces, sometimes these vaults are on the ground and upper floors. Okay, you can create little study areas. Fantastic, lovely places. I've seen this done in flats where they put the study in, their little working room, which is a great peaceful place, because you can imagine the acoustics with a foot thick concrete walls are pretty good. And imagine the feature of keeping the old bank vault door welded out the way so it's open, and a nice little glass door in front of it. You can really do some clever stuff with vaults. If you want, stick a wine cellar in there. Very good, highly recommended. So there are some, you know, when you've got vaults and things and features, you can really turn them to your advantage. And that, I guess, is really the way with a lot of development. Look to see what you can do with what you've got. That's the clever thinking, not just try and rip it out, because many a new developer will look at a bank, oh, complications, walk away. Okay, so think about those things. And I think then just a couple of things to say to be careful of before we start diving into questions. I see them all still coming in. Big windows. Okay, generally banks have big windows. What am I talking about? Big windows. He's getting excited about big windows. Claps on. What's he getting there? They're expensive to replace or refurbish. Have a think about that. If it was a listed building or a conservation area, you may have to keep the windows and actually refurbish them. Quite expensive. So just make sure when you're budgeting a refurb that you allow enough for the windows, because they're often big windows. I mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to mention it again. Alterations to the structure, if you need to do it, can be expensive. So work primarily with your structural engineer, I mentioned that just now, alongside your architect to work a layout, if you can, around the existing building. Okay. And then really, as a sort of a final sort of be careful warning, just make sure you think about the appearance of the building, because they'll often still look like a bank. And that might put some people off. You've got to turn them into residential in some way. Now, that can be done. Just got to think out the box. You've got to be a bit clever. But sometimes the appearance will make them difficult to sell. So you've got to get, now there is a way, you just got to get that right. So I'm just prompting you to think about it. I guess overall, just in our sort of brief introduction to banks, a great opportunity. If you know what you're doing, it's a great opportunity. Lots out there, robust structure, You can work with the structure, you can work with the features, you can work with the double height spaces. These give you opportunities, the vaults give you the opportunities. Very nice schemes, can work very well, and not a lot of people look at them. So overall, what a great opportunity. Go for a bank. There we go. That's my overview on banks. What do you think of that?
That's really good. Cashless banks. What about that?
Yeah.
Whoever thought?
I
And
can
whoever
believe it.
thought? Yeah, I didn't realize your bookmaker still wasn't taking checks. So, but
It
hey,
was
hey.
bizarre. I just, if you could have photographed my face, it was a picture. Now, I don't think I'm that old, but I was gobsmacked that they said, "Oh no, we don't have any cash in the bank, sir." They looked at me like I was stupid, and I did feel a bit silly. I mean, how could I go to the bank and ask for some money? Yeah, can I have some of my money, please? No, we don't keep any here.
Liking the idea of wine cellars in the basement, though. That definitely sounds good.
Loving it. Good stuff. So, have we got some questions? Do you want to kick stuff off? You can answer the first question. Go for it.
I'll answer the first question, and I'll ask it as well. What about this? This one is from who's it from? There's the name. Oh, Jess. Welcome, Jess. Who I think, if I was being a little bit unkind, has maybe joined and just missed the smidgen of the first part of what you were saying. Can you please clarify? Did you say we have permitted development rights to convert banks into residential? So yes, Jess, we do have permitted development rights for all Class E buildings, of which banks are now one. We can convert those into to residential using the permitted development right known as Class MA. All gets a bit complicated, so many classes around, but the use Class E and the permitted development Class MA. The other interesting thing, of course, is that whilst you'd normally think that converting it into residential perhaps would be the most profitable route, you can also convert any Class E building into any other type of Class E building. So if you thought you had a great idea that you want to open a restaurant, turn a bank into a restaurant, well, the dark old days, you would need planning permission, but now you can just go ahead and do it because they are both Class E buildings. But yeah, those PD rights are there for us to convert banks now. Hope that helps, Jess.
Good stuff. Jess, you should have been paying attention. What's the matter with you? Okay, next question in. This is from Keith. Good evening, Keith. Welcome. Keith says, you mentioned keeping the vaults in place. Okay, I did mention that, didn't I, Keith? Surely we would get more value by taking them out, even if they are expensive to remove, and getting more residential space. I'm going to link this to another question that's come in from Yoko. Hello, Yoko. Good evening to you. She says, hi, Rich and Ian. Would you know how much it might cost to get the huge safe out of the basement? Look, so let me answer this too. Well, first of all, Yoko, don't take it out. Okay, don't take it out. You don't want to take it out. They might have a freestanding safe, which case you might want to take it out, but I still wouldn't. I'd leave it as a feature. I'd build it in as a feature. A nice freestanding safe in an apartment, okay, provided you've got enough room in his apartment, I'd have that as a nice wine fridge. You know, that's those, you can do really clever things. We've done lots of things like this over the years. But going back to Keith's question, look, maybe, okay, Keith, in certain circumstances, in very high value areas, taking out the vault structure could give you more beneficial in residential area. But you're going to have to be high value. You're going to have to be, you know, some of the more expensive high value cities in this country to do that. But Keith, I mentioned as well, sometimes this big concrete safe structure, okay, more often than not, they're reinforced concrete, which are they're called in situ, they're cast on the site. They often are integral with the building structure. They're part of the structure. So the cost is not just to remove it, it's actually to alter and put back some structure into the building to keep the building stable. So the costs can get quite expensive. And what I'm saying is you don't just dismiss this space. And you know, that's what a lot of newbie developers do. They go, I'm just going to ignore the vaulted area. No, as I said, you can turn this into some useful space, even if it's storage space, even if it's a gym. Okay, you can make these spaces work in your schemes. So you're getting some value out of them. You're getting some pounds per square meter out of them without having to take them out. Now, if you're just trying to squeeze very small, up to 37 square meter national space down to 1-bedroom flats, you know, you're going to struggle because you can't put a bedroom in there because you've got to get natural light. You could get a window cut in it, but really, you know, these are bank buildings often are slightly grander apartments. You know, you're going to probably get a command a bit more price for these, Keith, in which case, you know, you can probably be thinking about maybe 1 or 2 bed flats or 1-bed flats with a little study space, something like that. Or as I say, a communal gym. So actually these flats are commanding a premium, okay, a little bit sort of edging onto co-living, okay, command a premium by having a facility there. A lot of developers would do that. So Keith, no, I think you've got to assess each situation, and generally I would say to you, probably leaving them in is better. And Yoko, to remove a safe, if you've got a smallish safe, that you can get them removed fairly cost effectively. But if it's a reasonable size safe in a bank, try and keep it and try and incorporate it. Hopefully that's answered a couple of questions there. Ian, over to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Got one here from David. Good evening, David. Are there any other buildings that you can convert other than banks without planning? Well, answer yes. There's quite a few that you can convert. So Class E, which banks, as I mentioned, are in, they have quite a few other buildings in that category. So shops, cafes, restaurants, gyms, doctors' surgeries, light industrial buildings, they all fall into that Class E category. And we have the rights to be able to convert them into residential. There are others as well, so you can convert things like agricultural buildings, which is Class Q. I think what I'd say is that I think if you want to stick to the kind of the sweet spot where it's probably the easiest and the quickest and perhaps the less contentious, things like Class MA is probably the way to go because there's such a raft of opportunity there, all sorts of different building types. There's loads of them around the country. There's a real healthy supply of all of those buildings, and it's a brand new permitted development right. So I think that is the starting point. But there are a whole raft of PD rights for different types of buildings. Some are more complex than others. So hope that helps.
Good. Yeah, good. Okay, let's see what we've got here. So Mikey's question says, what about some of the bank buildings that look just like a shop? Are these any different? Well, Mikey, yeah, I just referred to them just now. They are a bit different, okay? Because generally, and there are, and I guess some of the Nationwide and Santander's, those type of buildings, sometimes they're in what you might perceive to be looking like retail shop units. So the main structure could have been built by someone else, not commissioned by the bank, but they've gone in and done alterations. So they can be different. What I suggest, Mikey, is you need to get into those with your team, okay? So you need to get your structural engineer and architect in there, because quite often the banks will do quite a bit of alteration to those units to make them fit their needs. So there's almost certainly going to be some vaults, unless they're a cashless bank these days, okay? Blimey. So there's probably going to be some alterations they've done. There's probably going to be some vaults of some sort in there. So the main structure might not be as robust, and it won't be necessarily as grand. You're probably not going to have a grand banking hall, but some of the problems with vaults that people perceive could still be taken to your advantage if you know what to do with it. So yeah, they are a little bit different, albeit you could say some of them are the same. Ian, what's next?
I've got one here from Kathy, who bumped into us at the National Landlords Investor Show this week. And
hi, Kathy.
Hello, Kathy. Good to see you here. So she says, it's good to be here tonight. My question: what would be your top tip for someone brand new thinking of starting their own developments? I think the answer, and I probably would say this, but it's to get trained, get some education behind you. One of the challenges with development, I think, is that it's quite easy to get into. The barriers to entry are pretty low. So if you want to give it a go, there's pretty much nothing stopping you. The problem is that there's quite some chunky sums of money flying around, and actually if you fall down one of the holes that you didn't know was there, then yeah, you can make some expensive mistakes. I think the other thing that comes with getting yourself trained, and it's like we're talking about banks tonight, but there's a whole raft of these kind of very specific opportunities that exist in development that a lot of people miss. A lot of people just do the kind of the straightforward vanilla stuff. But actually, with a bit of knowledge, it really does go a long way. You can see opportunities that other people really aren't focusing on and learn and kind of specialize in doing those. Particularly, as you can imagine, if there are loads of banks for sale at the moment, as an example, you could then become a bank expert. You don't need to do too many of those to make a very a healthy living from bank conversions. But being able to learn where the opportunities are and then how then you can make the most of them. I would say that would be the number one thing. Get yourself educated and go on from there. Hope that helps, Kathy, but thank you for setting up the training question. Much appreciated.
Nice to see you again, Kathy, although I can't see you this evening. And no. But if we could, nice to see you. Okay, I'm going to pick up Alan's put two questions in. Alan said, can you cover capital allowances on banks? Yeah, you can. Banks are like the same as any commercial building. If you take the building over, providing, now I'm not a capital allowances expert, I'm not giving you tax advice, so be careful of that. But basically, providing that the capital allowances haven't been claimed before, you can claim certain capital allowances on buildings. And there are other capital allowances you can do if there's contamination you're trying to strip out, asbestos comes under that, you can claim, 150% of the cost of it back. There's various things that you can do. So banks are no different to any other commercial building that you're going to take over and refurbish. Get a capital allowances specialist, okay? Your accountant might be able to help you. They're not all specialists in this, and really get a steer and a guide. But there's definitely money as developers that you can claim. And Alan's second question is, so I'm just picking up two from Alan, so thank you, Alan. What do you do with the cash point? Well, as Ian said, Alan, you take the cash point, you jemmy it open when you get home, and you take the cash. Although I have seen on movies on the telly, I don't think that works because I think that it ejects dye all over the cash. So if I'm walking around trying to give you £10 notes with blue dye over, you know where I've got them. I guess in the question Alan's asking is, what do you do with the cash point machine? Look, it's quite likely if the bank's for sale, the cash point machine's gone. Okay, they take those out. Those have disappeared and they just block it up. You do have a hole in the wall that you've got to do something with. A lot of these buildings, you can picture an old bank with Portland stone. You get some Portland stone to fill the gap up. You can do that sort of thing, or be creative. Have it as a central letterbox for the flats that are in there. There's all sorts of things you can do. So the machine will have gone. Sorry, Alan, the machine's definitely gone. No money's going to be in it, but you're going to have to do something filling the hole in the wall up. There we go. Hopefully that's give you a bit of a steer on there, on the hole in the wall, and of course thinking about capital allowances. He says, haha, thank you both. No problems at all. Ian, over to you.
Sebastian, good evening, Sebastian, asked, how easy is it to raise money for these schemes when you first start out?
Well, all you need is a cash point from a bank, Sebastian, then you've got all your money.
There you go. Or take the vault out. It's not like getting a mortgage. I think that's the first thing to say, that when people look at development finance, they can see some quite big sums of money involved, but it's not like you're borrowing the money personally to buy your own home. Basically, you're going to be finding money from a commercial lender, maybe a crowdfunder. They're normally going to be lending you up to 70% of the bank, in this case, the cost of buying the bank, and then they'll lend you 100% of the development funding. So what the money that you need to be able to develop the bank into your flats. And typically, what they look at is the deal first. So they're going to want to make sure that the deal stacks up, and they're going to stress test it. They're going to be kicking the tires pretty hard to do things like, what happens if there was a dip in the market? What happens if the contractor goes bust? And they'll be working out all sorts of scenarios. And to be honest, they make better deal analyzers than you do, because they do it day in, day out. They're teams of people, and all they do is they look at deals and they try and break them. And so that if they lend you some money after all of that tire kicking, then you've got yourself a good deal. So the deal is the most important thing to them. It doesn't matter how credible you are. If the deal doesn't stack up, they won't lend you the money. The second thing that they're going to want to look at is the team. So they recognize that you're not that handy with a trowel, so you won't be building it. They know who's going to be building it, they know who's going to be designing it, and they want to know that those people are up to the job, both in terms of their experience. So has the contractor done this sort of work before, this type of project? Has the architect been involved in something like this before? But also they want to look at the financial stability of those people. Again, nobody wants to be working on a project when the contractor goes bust for whatever reason. So again, they're going to be kicking those tires. Then they come to you, and of course they are going to look at you, and they're going to be assessing your ability. But the fact that you're new won't hold you back. They've got some tools that they can use to kind of mitigate for that risk, because obviously they can flex the structure of a deal to do that. But from their perspective, if you look at it through their eyes, whilst not every lender likes lending to new developers, there are a lot that do. And of course, without new developers, then the market would simply die out. There would be no people developing after all the old ones are gone. So getting new blood into the industry is great for commercial lenders, and in particular because, of course, somebody that does their first development successfully is likely then to go on to do a second, a third, a fourth, and so on. And of course, that's all good custom for the bank. So there we go, Sebastian. Hopefully that helps.
I think we need to apologise to Sebastian. I think you're a bit harsh.
About?
Well, I mean, you suggested that Sebastian was not handy with a trowel. How do you know Sebastian can't build a blockwork or a brickwork wall?
I'll take it back, Sebastian. I do apologise profusely. I made an assumption there.
Sorry about Sebastian. I don't want Sebastian suing us or anything like that. Sebastian, sorry about that. I do apologise for my my business partner here. He will be reprimanded tomorrow, maybe put on furlough. Oh no, furlough's ended. Oh well, you'll have to stay in.
Sorry about that.
No problems at all. Okay, I've got to pick this back up. I've got to go back to Yoko here because she was asking. Do you remember everyone? She was asking about getting that safe out. And I sort of said leave it in, and she's put a sad face in. She said thank you, but it was a pretty large one, so, and she put a real sad face. One thing you could, so I need to go back and give Yoko a bit more help here because I don't want a sad face, I want a smiley face from Yoko. I don't want people upset. I'm already upset Sebastian with Ian's comment that he can't build brick walls. So Yoko, I don't want to upset. Yoko, one thing you can do, and this is for everyone as well, if you have got a fairly large steel safe, okay, there might be people that will get rid of it for the scrap value. You know, might be for nothing. They might not pay you, but they might actually have enough scrap value in it. They have to be cut up, sometimes with a torch, but they can, I'm not talking about, you know, I'm talking about, you know what I mean. Anyway, so they're going to have to be cut up to get those things removed out. But what I would do, inquire with some demolition contractors. I mean, I'm not talking about your gypsy fellas that walk around with a pickup truck and they're going to come and do it. Don't do that, okay? But there are plenty of bona fide demolition style contractors. I'd reach out to some of them who might come and remove it for nothing for the scrap value. Have a think about that, okay? Hopefully I'll get a smiley face off of Yoko. Jenny says, what would your suggestion be? What would your suggestion be to find banks for sell? Would they use particular commercial agents? Yeah, good question, Jenny, actually. They generally do. What I'm going to suggest to you is use the portals to start this because they often have headquarters somewhere and they'll use then a national commercial agent. They don't tend to, you know, if you're in Birmingham or if you're in Newcastle, they don't tend to just use the local because they're trying to get rid of the Newcastle branch or the Stepford branch or whatever it might be. So what I suggest is Google them. You'll generally find, okay, a lot of these banks have national agents that they appoint, and reach out to that national agent because what they tell you, if you build, it's you, Jenny, you know, Jenny's one of our students, by the way. Not that you needed to know that, but because of what I'm going to say, is building rapport. Jenny knows this, okay? It's about building rapport with people. So if you can find Jenny, the person, and might be Roman has asked this question, I don't know, but whoever's asked this question, Jenny or Rome, then if you can actually build the rapport with them, with this regional, they'll tell you what's coming up. Another one that's common in sort of national agents is police stations, those sort of go through those fire stations, those sort of buildings. Don't go for those because you can't convert them under PD. I'm just telling you, just giving you a feel. So reach out, find those national agents. That might help. Can I pick up another question because I'm enjoying this? Can I go another one? I mean, I don't want to upset you, but would it be okay?
No, go on.
Selena's question is, what can you put in the ground floor if the bank is in a conservation area under Class E? Class MA, does it have to be retail or can it be offices? So good question, actually. So look, conservation area, strictly speaking, Class MA means you can convert the whole building, okay? You can convert the whole building to residential, even the ground floor. If it's in a conservation area, then the local planning officer has an opportunity to consider the impact. It doesn't mean to say you can't change it, but it has an opportunity to consider the impact on the change of use. So if you change it to residential, say, Lena, on the character or sustainability of the conservation area. I don't know what sustainability means, but basically it's the character. So what they're not going to want is you changing the appearance of this building so it becomes residential and the area changes. Well, you're largely not going to change the appearance of the building. So you might have a chance of getting away with this, okay? What they might not want, though, is they might not want the loss of the sort of, when they talk about sustainability, of the commercial space in the area. So what you might want to consider doing, if that was to be a problem, okay, Then you start thinking about getting involved with your planning consultant, of maybe leaving a bit of retail space or office space at the front. So you can definitely do retail or office, but actually you can still convert it to residential depending on how the impact of it looks. Hopefully that's give you a bit of a steer. I know he's going to get cross, so I'm going to pass back to Ian, although I have said that it was a good idea, says Yoko. It was a sturdy steel safe. Thank you, smiley face. Our job is done there. Ian, over to you.
You've turned the frown upside down. Look at that, fantastic.
Oh, that rhymes. Very good. I like what you've done.
Yeah. One here from Aiken. Good evening, Aiken. Is development a good place to start your property journey, or do you suggest starting with buy-to-lets, etc., to learn the ropes first? Okay, I think there's sometimes a bit of a misconception that there's this sort of pyramid within property circles, that sort of you start with something nice and simple like buy-to-lets, and then you end up working your way up the pyramid until you get to property development. They're different things, they're different pyramids. There's definitely some things that they have in common. They're definitely all part of the world of property, and certainly when you do things like do a buy-to-let and you do it up or you renovate it, whatever, there are certain elements there that are that have some commonality with development, but they are different things. Buy-to-lets have tenants. Yeah, one of the nice things about being a developer is you don't have any tenants at all. Boilers don't break down because they're all new, etc., etc. And it's a very different process. So I would say absolutely not. If you want to do development, you crack on and do development. In fact, most established developers, that's exactly what they did. They got started in development. There's not this requirement to have to build up some sort of rental portfolio and then earn your spurs and go and do development after that. If that's what you want to do, then I would go straight ahead and do it. I think the other thing I'd say is that for a lot of people, you know, and in fact, getting into the business of becoming a landlord, you obviously need deposits, and you need to be able to work up and build up some cash to be able to do that. And again, development is a great way of actually building that pot and doing it relatively quickly compared to kind of the equity growth that you get from being a landlord. So if you are doing the two things together, now that can be very smart indeed. Taking the money from your developments and then ploughing it into your portfolio will enable you to kind of supercharge things. But no, if you want to do development, you can crack on and do it. But I would say get trained first. I can hope that helps.
Well, Jenny put a smiley face in, and we're getting smiley faces tonight, which is quite pleasant. Jenny put a smiley face in. We talked about finding agents, and I was smiling there because Akin, who we were just talking to, he says, thanks for the straight talking answer, and he's put a smiley face. I think that's a smiley face. It's a bit small for me to see, but I think it is. So smiley faces all round. Good stuff. I like it. What's the time? Let's see if we can squeeze another quick one in here. Harvey says, hello, Harvey. Good evening to you. He says, do you think we would get old bank buildings for a good price? Yeah, I reckon you will, Harvey, to be fair. Okay. Remember I said there's going to be quite a lot for sale. Now, just because these buildings are empty, and they will be, these banks will having to be paying rates on them. A lot of the bank buildings are owned by the banks. Okay, they're often owned by the banks. Sometimes they own a long lease on a building, and there's a vendor that owns them. And it can be sometimes that the vendor, and this could be a bit rare, but sometimes the vendor might say, well, you've got to pay your money unless you can try and sell this whole thing on. So you might get something which is offered as a lease opportunity to take over a lease, but you might be able to negotiate the purchase of the building. But a lot of them are owned by the banks themselves, okay? And, you know, whilst it might not be a big impact on their bottom line, it will be an impact. And most of these banks are audited, so they have to be seen to be doing the right thing. So they will want to get shot of these. Quite often they go to auction because they need to be seen, particularly if it's a PLC, to be getting the best price, Harvey. So they're going to want to put them at auction, and then they've proved they've got the best price for it. But I suspect most of these buildings have been written off on their balance sheet. They've got no real value left, okay, I'd imagine. And so they're probably not that fussed whether they get 300,000 or 360 or 400,000 for a particular building. Sure, they're going to want to maximize it, but the reality is it's probably not going to affect them. Okay, this is big organizations. If you're buying a building off of a private individual, part of their private portfolio, yeah, you know, they need every penny they can get. But often these banks, they're not so worried about that. They just want to get shot of it. So Harvey, yeah, I think, and this is why a lot of people ask us about banks, and just why we wanted to bring it up as a subject this evening, is that there are great opportunities on banks. I might even do a little video snippet for a lot of people. And by the way, if you haven't seen, pop onto YouTube. If you are new, you can go and listen to all the back copies of Open Door, and also on YouTube. So just type in YouTube Property CEO. You can listen to a lot of our little snippet videos. It's just me generally having a rant every now and then for 5 minutes. I might do one on banks, so watch that space, but there's quite a few on there. Harvey hopefully answers that question. I think we're sort of really running out of time, Ian, aren't we?
I think we are, unless you fancy doing a quick one for the road.
Oh, well, what do you want me to pick? One? I don't know. Alan's put another one in. Would conversion to MA allow short-term accommodation? If you're talking about service departments, the answer, Alan, is no. Different use class. Okay, so no, it doesn't. Class MA will allow you to go to C3 residential, not serviced accommodation. There you are. There's a quick answer. There ends the session. What do you think, Ian? Did you enjoy that?
I enjoyed that. Yeah, I think the whole, who knew? Cashless banks, wine cellars, it was all going on, and smiley faces to end with.
Even Alan's just put a smiley face in. Thank you, Alan. If you've enjoyed the show, please, as always, put it in the chat box, put some comments in there. Tell us how much you enjoyed the show. Tell us what was fantastic. Tell us what was great. Don't give us bad news tonight. We're on an upbeat roll today. We've been training all day today. We're training all day tomorrow and Saturday. So we're on an upbeat roll. It's what we enjoy the most. So please let us know in the chat box if you've enjoyed the show. We put it on for you folks out there. So let us know if you enjoy it, in which case we will come back again. Albeit we're not coming back again next week. Okay, I do apologize. A little bit of logistics. We were planning to do a show next week, but we're actually up in Harrogate. If anyone's up in Harrogate or lives in that area of the country, come and see us. Okay, we are exhibiting at the home building. What's it called? Home building and renovating show. I think that's where we're going, isn't it, Ian?
You call it what you like. Yeah. Home building and renovating show in the Harrogate Conference Centre.
So we will be up there in Harrogate next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you are interested, come and visit us there. Come and have a chat. Come and meet us face to face. Tell us you've been on the show. Tell us how wonderful we are. We love all that sort of stuff. We might even smile and shake your hand. So unfortunately, a bit of logistics. We've got to set the show up on the Thursday evening. We're going to go up with the team to do that. So we're not going to have time to squeeze in an open door. So we will be back on Thursday, the 11th of November. So you're going to have to wait a week, unless, of course, you come and see us at the Harrogate show. So let's see what people say. Let's see if anyone's actually enjoyed it this evening. Let's have a look. Okay. Jenny says, thanks, Rich and Ian. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Oh, of course, your students are going to see us next week. So I thought you should come to Harrogate show. Sarah says, loving the show. Really interesting. Look forward to coming back. This is my first show. Looking forward to come back and see you again. Well, don't forget, Sarah, it's on the 11th. Carol says, interesting. Okay, interesting. Okay, that's good. Interesting, I hope. Thanks, guys. Great show, guys, says Dan. Harjinder says, great to watch you guys. Great content as always. Harvey said, great answers. Love it. Look forward to seeing you next week. Chris says, I'm going to come and see you at the show. Brilliant. Carol Smith says, yes. Carol Smith says, what? Interesting. Oh, interesting in a positive way. I think that's what it just popped in. And finally, Yoko says, really enjoyed Richie and Ian. Thank you so much for the informative, fun session. Jack says, sorry I was late, but I can't beat a happy ending. Jack, nor can we. Sorry you were late. I didn't notice you snuck in late, but we can't beat a happy ending. We love a happy ending. Let's end on one. Good night. See you in a couple of weeks. Cheers now. Bye-bye.
Bye.